Hello everybody, welcome to the Ottawa Senators Outlook. I'm your host Jack, and this is the 7th episode of Taking Notes, and we're going to go over reports that have been going around for a little bit. The Streets reported it a couple of weeks ago, and the Streets don't miss, but seemed like they were a little cold, but it seems like the rumors are heating up. Michael Andlauer is most likely going to be the next owner of the Ottawa Senators. This comes after the news broke that Steve Apostolopoulos said, "I'm not bidding for the Sens anymore." He dropped out after pretty much a weird way of dropping out. I think with the out clause, 1 year out clause or something like that. Whoever that was from, seemed like the bank wasn't comfortable with it, and that's what pulled out. And also, he was very frustrated with the process too. And so are Sens fans, including myself. I think this process is a big of a mess. But if you want me to be honest with you, I'm kind of happy his bid did not win, even though it was a front runner. It was the bid that was bidding $1 billion, but if you're a Sens fan, do you want Nick Kypreos in your front office? I wouldn't, so I'm not really worried about it. That leaves 3 bids left. Obviously, Michael Andlauer, who is most likely going to be the next owner, and that's been reported for a little bit now. There's still the Kimmel Group, who is a really, really competitive group as well. I like what they bring to the table, especially having Alfredson, Chris Neal, Wade Breton, and Chris Phillips, and Hockey Ops in the picture in general. I think that's a really good idea to have. And they have the money too. They have the Weekend in there too. They have another billionaire. So they have the money too. And then the Nico Sparks group, who is in it but not in it at the same time. It's weird how that group is still in it. I don't know what's going on with them. But for the most part, we can consider them out. It's in between Andlauer and the Kimmels. And if it's down to those 2 bids, I wouldn't be complaining because I like both of those bids. But like I said, Andlauer is most likely going to be the owner. And it seemed like the NHL wanted that too. He's part of the Board of Governors, I believe. So it makes a little bit of sense. But we're going to go over what Michael Andlauer might do if he officially becomes the owner of the Ottawa Senators. And we're going to start off with the head coaching. It seems like DJ Smith is most likely going to get fired by the ownership if that's the case. I don't think a single Sens fan would be surprised if that happened. And based on rumors, it seems like there are 2 guys that are going to be the head coach. One of the 2 guys. Former Bruins and Canadiens coach. He was also a coach of the Devils for 1 year. Claude Julien, obviously, that was the guy that most of us thought would be the head coach. He showed up to Ottawa games. I think he was a scout for St. Louis too. So a lot of people were thinking that guy would be the coach. And I would still be very open to that. He has a lot of ties with Andlauer, and he has a lot of ties with Pierre Dorion as well. So makes a little bit of sense there. And this one came up a week ago, and he seems like he wants to be back in the NHL. We're going to talk about Patrick Roy, the former head coach of the Colorado Avalanche for 3 years from 2013 to 2016. And he just recently won a Memorial Cup with the Quebec Ramparts. So good for him. And he seems like a good candidate as well. I wouldn't like the Kimmels versus the Andlauer bid for the ownership. I would be alright with both of these guys that are head coach. I think they both bring a lot of competitiveness to the table, especially Patrick Roy. His systems seem really, really tight, and the players like playing for him. That seemed like a problem when he was with the Colorado coach. It seemed like he had too much power over the players, and they just had a lot of worries that coaching in junior league converting to the NHL level. So, seems like he wants to be back in the NHL, and this is really not much of a surprise. We've been hearing about these rumors, believe it or not, since 2021, and we've heard he wanted to go back in a GM or head coaching role. And obviously the only head coaching vacancy is the New York Rangers, and they said they are not going to interview Patrick Roy. So I definitely see Roy as the front runner for the Ottawa Senators coaching job if it becomes available, which there's like a 99% chance that happens. We're going to talk about the GM role now. It's obviously Pierre Dorion is the GM right now, and based on what it sounds like, it seems like he might stick around, but something to keep in note too. Andlauer was the owner of the Hamilton Bulldogs, and his GM at the time was Steve Staios, who is currently an advisor with the Edmonton Oilers. And there were heavy rumors of him possibly being the Sens GM, which, listen, I think he's a great guy, but he doesn't really have much experience in the front office. But that doesn't mean he can't be a GM. and he's with Edmonton right now. And it seems like all signs are pointing to Edmonton gonna. It seems like Edmonton's gonna protect Steve Staios because it seems like when Ken Holland steps down from the GM role, which I don't know when that's gonna be, maybe next year. There were rumors of that this year, but probably not. Steve Staios would be the new GM if Ken Holland stepped down from the GM role and stayed as president of Hockey Ops. And then here's the little concerning part about Michael Andlauer's bid. It seems like St. Louis Vice President of Hockey Operations Peter Chiarelli is going to be an advisor, which I would be alright with. He was a former assistant GM with Ottawa back in the 90s, but go back to his GM stint in Edmonton, and that's just really, really, really scary to have, in my opinion. I don't think he's a bad guy. He won the Stanley Cup with the Bruins, and that could also be a fit with Claude Julien as well, because Peter Chiarelli was a GM with the Bruins in 2011, and Claude Julien coached that team. So I could kind of see a fit there where they hired both of those guys, but in my opinion, I personally would stay away from Peter Chiarelli as far as possible, and that's really the only concerning thing about the Andlauer bid, in my opinion. In terms of Steve Staios, I mean, I would rather stick with Pierre Dorion for at least another year to see what he can do. Nothing against Steve Staios whatsoever, but I just feel like Dorion has earned the right to stick around with the new ownership because he's made some pretty good moves for this team, and he's locked up the core at an incredible level. So you got to give your props to Pierre Dorion there. I don't know if I would mess around with that much. But the head coaching, that's either going to go to Julien or Patrick Waugh, in my opinion. Like I said, I wouldn't mind either of those guys. Peter Chiarelli as an advisor, I would be open to it, but I would kind of stay a little far away from Chiarelli, in my opinion. So, yeah, there's the Taking Notes episode. I hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe. But for now, it's Jack Nagata, Sanders Zellick, and Go Sens Go.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of Taking Notes, a presentation of the Ottawa Senators Outlook. We appreciate your dedication of contributions to this channel from viewers like you. Thank you.